Welcome everybody to this session. I hope you've had a good week. Condolences, I saw one of us has lost a colleague. Quite a number of us, I'm sure that has been the story this week. Quite a number of people have passed. Parents of colleagues at UMU, a colleague died today. I was also thinking the same thing, especially today being a public holiday, but then I thought, okay, why don't I just teach you today? Tomorrow I give you a chance to just go and relax. I'll put up a small quiz, giving you some days to do it. At least we try to go back and think as we are going through this difficult time. But for today, let's just try and look at data analysis. And and while we continue to pray for one another. So I welcome you to this today's session. Last Sunday we had a discussion. By the way, I didn't get feedback from it. It was quite rushed. I don't know how that session was. If it was helpful in any way. We really didn't get much time to discuss. Maybe we could also use this time we discuss and we see which gaps to fill, especially from the workshop we had on Sunday. We have any comments? No, they'll come as we go along.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let me just take us through data analysis. You'll notice from the lecture we had, the workshop we had, we usually either have qualitative research or quantitative, and in other cases we have mixed methods. I still haven't given you that video. I promised it to you, but this week has been quite hectic, especially with the several people that I have that I'm looking after who are suffering from COVID. So I really haven't had time, but I'll get round and make for you that video on quantitative research questions and hypotheses. But today, let's look at qualitative data analysis. Whether you're doing, whatever research you're doing, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods, you will have, if you're doing mixed methods, you'll encounter both. If you're doing qualitative, then you will do qualitative and then a little bit of quantitative, just a little bit. Whatever the case, it falls under these two types of analysis. So let us start with qualitative data analysis. I know majority at master's level normally go for qualitative research, especially for ICT and IS, the kind of research that is expected of you by the faculty. But we shall cover both. I'm not an expert on quantitative analysis. I'll call on Crippen to give us more clarification on that, but I'm more on the qualitative side in terms of experience. I'm not an expert, but in terms of experience, let's so to speak. So first of all, what is qualitative data? We discussed it on Sunday. I think the moderator, Mr. Sanya, gave us a really good definition of qualitative data. But basically, this is non-numerical data that cannot be reduced to numbers. Those who have done, I'm sure if Crippen gave us his experience, quantitative data can always be reduced to numbers, can always be presented in terms of numbers, in terms of statistics, in terms of an average, a mean, and so on and so forth. but not qualitative data. It can't be easily reduced. You may have situations where a researcher is saying that, oh, a number of respondents talked about this, but that researcher will not give figures normally. They normally won't give those figures. But it can't be reduced to numbers. That's why it's referred to as qualitative in terms of quality, in terms of it's getting the opinions of people, the opinions, the values, the behaviors of people. And normally that data is, what happens is a qualitative researcher gets a lot of data, usually huge amounts of data. The qualitative researcher will focus on one small area, maybe one case study, one organization, but really delves deep, really goes deep into a specific case study or into a specific phenomena. Let us say the person is looking at an organization. The person is going to interview people. The person is going to observe, is going to quite a bit of documentation belonging to that organization, is going to spend time maybe observing certain business processes, understanding them, will take pictures, will maybe make videos, whatever it is, the person is really going to collect quite a lot of data. It's really huge, it's chunky. Then afterwards, as they begin to analyze it, they break it down. They go through a process of breaking it down and classifying it. Or in other terms, what some people refer to as, sorry if I can just get something here. What some people refer to as coding. I just wanted to get the pointers here to help me. Oh, today what's wrong? Sorry, this one, I didn't do this earlier, but basically they do what we refer to as coding. At the end, I'll show you just a snippet of something that I did. So that we can see what we mean by classifying or coding. So what is qualitative data analysis? Essentially, you're going through a range of processes and procedures where you're getting your data, your chunky data, and you're trying to explain it, make meaning out of it, and interpreting it and the situations in which you've been investigating. So it's quite a lot of data that you pick, but you're trying to make meaning out of it so that you explain to the audience what you have discovered. Now, data analysis in general is defined as the process of breaking down data into units, into smaller units. You determine their importance and then putting pertinent units together into a more general form. So that you're bringing forward new knowledge. So whatever data it is, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, you go through a process of breaking it down into smaller units and then bringing meaning out of it to explain something you're trying to explain something out of that data that you have picked out, or this huge amount of data that you have collected, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. Now, specifically, even going further into what data analysis is, it's essentially going through the entire, the data analysis. If we're looking at qualitative data, data analysis begins during the process of collecting data. Unlike quantitative data, you start even earlier. And the process of analyzing, you're actually interacting with the data itself. Analysis, first of all, for qualitative data begins first and foremost as you're beginning to interact with the researcher, with the participants. You, the researcher, as you begin to interact with the participants. I remember on last Sunday when Susan talked about specifically her experience, where she said they are that where she told the incidents of in cases of tourists when an emergency comes out, and the people or the scouts who lead tourists on hikes, on tourist hikes, something happens, but the person takes 40 minutes going to a station where they report, when they could have actually made a call. And from that period, from that, she also deduced or induced that in some cases, these scouts actually are lacking infrastructure where they can make a call. They have equipment, but can't make the calls, maybe because of the basic infrastructure that supports mobile communication, which could have made things faster. Now, already, by observing that, she's already started analysis. She already knows there is a theme which refers to lack of the backbone infrastructure for mobile communication. She already has that, and she has already observed it. This is even before she's done with collection of data. But you can already see from her interaction with the participants, she has already picked something. This is quite different from quantitative data, where you wait until you're done with data collection to begin data analysis. Now, it is very important that perspective is given to the interpretive nature of the analysis, and that this analysis is emergent in nature. This is why, sorry, is there a question? No, but do you have a question?
No, sorry, Dr. President. I think I left my mic on. Let me mute.
Okay. So one of the important things to understand about qualitative analysis, or even qualitative research in general, it is normally referred to as emergent design, meaning things or the research emerges as the more you interact with the participants and with your case study with the phenomena, the more your research design begins to emerge. So even you may even decide to add something to your research design that wasn't previously there in your proposal, that it emerges as things go on. This is quite different from quantitative data, which is quite linear, it has a very specific trajectory, and where you first begin by your research question, then your hypothesis, which may lead to an objective, and then you have your specific variables that you need to measure. You have your specific tools, your questionnaire, and you go out, collect the data, and then afterwards do the analysis. It's quite linear. Qualitative data is quite different. Now you may find, for example, in Susan's case, she has observed these things. She has observed that these scouts, they are given ICT tools, but they actually don't use them. Either maybe one, there is no infrastructure. Two, they may not know how to use them, or they may think there's something else they need to add, or for whatever perspective. Now she may observe all these things, she may talk to them, then she might say at the end, let me give a questionnaire just to ascertain. She may not have thought of it before, but she'll think about it afterwards. So that gives the emerging nature of qualitative research design. So it also leads us to understand that you tend to have informal steps as you're gathering your data, quite different from quantitative data. There are some things where it's almost as if you're developing a relationship with the participants, with the case study itself. A relationship is developing between the researcher and the case study itself. You almost feel that way. And sometimes it may lead to a situation where you get a bias, but the researcher must always have that point when they keep questioning themselves that where am I being biased? Where am I pushing my own agenda as a person? That point must come where the researcher constantly questions themselves, and then they also have to make an effort to detach themselves, but at the same time, understand that the more they develop a relationship with the participants, with the case study, with the phenomena, the more they begin to understand and to gather more data from which they can develop even deeper themes. That is a key point. Now, there are some, well, quantitative data doesn't really have very strict rules the way quantitative data has. But however, there are some common problems that may arise. Because of the need to delve deep into qualitative data, there are times when a researcher may feel the need to rush, especially because you want to finish. Now, qualitative research normally doesn't need one to rush. It takes time. You may be focusing on one small area, but it takes time to understand certain things, for certain things to actually come out. Now, depending on the experience of the researcher, on their ability to get information from a particular case study, you may want to rush, and you may only get surface information. You may only get surface information. I remember, I think it was in this class where I told of a research which was being done, I think it was, I don't remember if it was Ghana or something, where there was a community radio station which was put up. And a year or two later, after the ICT4D designers came back to evaluate, they found that they had, in addition to the radio station, they had also added these what do they call them? There are these loudspeakers you can put in different parts of the village to keep broadcasting market prices. And then later on, they found out that this equipment had been vandalized. So initially, when they did the first evaluation, they were told, oh, there were some bad elements in the community who had vandalized. But when they spent more time trying to understand really how the community members felt about the radio station, they found out that community members were tired of constantly being told about business. They said they also wanted to hear entertainment things. For example, there are people who really enjoyed these, like the Telemundo soaps, Z World, and they wanted to be updated on those. Not to be told constantly about market prices of maize and beans and so on and so forth. And they found out that it was the community members themselves who had vandalized those pieces of equipment. So that one took a little bit of time. Some things need time. So in other words, most problems in qualitative data are it's living data that need to spend a little bit of time with. So now let's come to the term coding itself, which we have talked about. What is the coding process in itself? And some of these things we shall see in the slides before, but let us just try to understand what coding is. Coding is when you try to reduce the data into smaller groups. As you collect qualitative data, you will realize you'll speak to person X and maybe interview them. You'll observe this thing, and then you'll hear this. You'll see it being said, or you'll see it being done. So from all the different points, you will see certain pieces of data that are related. And when they're related, what we do as the researcher, you will group them together. So when you're grouping them, you're trying to manage them. In other words, you'll try to see, what does this relate to? Later on, you'll try to ask yourself, what does this piece of information relate to? Is it a negative? Does it have a negative impact in this phenomena? Does it have a positive impact? Does it create value? Does it take away value? What does it mean? So as you're doing this, the process is helping you to begin to see relationships between categories and patterns of interaction. As we move further, those kinds of relationships, another research will take them as hypothesis, a research that is building on top of your research. But you see now, you as a qualitative researcher, you're the one who's beginning to build relationships between different categories and to see certain patterns. So what we normally begin with in coding, we begin with what we refer to as transcripts. So what are the transcripts in particular? You're going to interview people, and as you interview, you record. Normally, that's what we do in qualitative research, record. And this I would emphasize to anyone who is doing qualitative research, record. There are many things. If you're going to really only focus on maybe a shorthand and writing down what somebody is saying, there are feelings that you miss out. There are certain words people say that really speak about that talk about the feeling somebody has, and you may miss that one out. So I would advise anyone, if you're doing qualitative research and specifically interviews, record. If you're doing focus group discussions, record. If you're whatever it is, if you're following a workshop, whatever it is, record it. Just do a voice record. If you're lucky enough to also do a video recording, please do so. Now, afterwards, the researcher gets these recordings and will transcribe them. Or in other words, will type them out. Will type out whatever is being said. Now, whatever is being said, then the researcher then, after has transcribed everything, will print them out and then begin to read through them. Okay? You begin to read through them and you begin to underline certain words. I don't know why I don't have a full picture here. Okay, this is better. Okay, so the person will begin to underline things that pop out, those certain things that mean the same thing. That you'll begin to underline them, bits of transcript as you read through. So as you read through, yes, please, Moses, you have a question?
Yes, on recording.
Yes.
Is it like normally, do you normally require consent, like to have consent papers from the person you record?
Yes, please. Just like you would get consent in a questionnaire, so also when you're doing an interview. So immediately you'd ask the person, number one, you'd ask the person to participate in your research. Two, you would also inform them that I'm recording for purposes of transcribing later on. So you need to get permission from the participant.
Okay.
So as we are coding, you're coding the speech, the words, the codes themselves, as you observe them, you also see themes beginning to emerge. Themes where the codes themselves, you can categorize them into themes or into relationships. So normally, this text we are reading, you have to read and reread. Read and reread. Now, it's almost the same as quantitative data and I'm sure Kripen can give us also maybe some experience here. When you go through data, you may start your first analysis and then you realize, but actually, I think I can compare this variable with this one. For all who have answered this in this variable, what does that imply for this other variable? You can actually begin to make those questions. Now, with qualitative data, what you're doing is reading through those transcripts, and you go back and reread through them. Sometimes I remember when I was doing my research, I did my first analysis, and then I was like, no, this is too shallow, and I binned it and I started all over again after I had gone through so many steps. Yeah, not just from transcribing, but also taking it through Atlas TI and creating themes. And then I was like, no, this is too shallow. Let me restart it. And I created other themes and I rethought about it. It really takes time to think about as you try to go through your data. So the theme itself is generated in the similar way the way you would have generated the code, but this is an idea that encompasses or that is covering or overarching your codes themselves. So the theme or the category may be labeled as a word or an expression, and your codes are related to the theme itself. And I'll show you, again, I'll show you an example of something that I did. So the field worker, in organizing the data, the field worker is trying to make sense of the data itself, which is quite large, yeah? It's quite large, and what the researcher is trying to do is put it into smaller groups. And as they are doing so, they also even, there are even certain quotations, things people say that really emphasize what somebody was trying to say. And they will actually pick on those quotes, and later on, as they give a narration in their analysis, they'll talk about a theme and the codes that they have developed underneath them, and they'll pick out something a particular person said to emphasize that theme, that emerging theme. Now, in exploring our data, like we said earlier, we normally start from the field. I remember I was telling Susan on Sunday, start writing memos immediately. Start writing memos. These themes we are talking about, they actually emerge even before you have started transcribing your data. You begin to see them. So already begin writing. If you're a qualitative researcher, begin writing while you're in the field. As you're writing your field notes, these themes and categories normally start while you're in the field. In creating the codes themselves, pick one document, like I had said earlier, and start by underlining. As you underline, as you identify the text, the different texts and segments which are similar. This person said this, talked about this particular thing. This other person also talked about this particular thing. I can code this, into something like this. And you keep moving on as your themes develop. I just want to quickly just take you to a particular example here. Let me just, although it was at the end, I felt this was something that I could pull out. Now, if you notice on this diagram, something like inaccessible health services, that was a code. Yeah? Look at this other one, traditional and information isolated. That is, no, sorry. Okay, these were codes that disempowered community. These were, sorry, I'm kind of forgetting. Sorry, these are the codes: the need for health, education, need for booking. Now, these were themes that were arising as I was doing my research. These were themes that were arising. Now, before I did my research, I started by analyzing the domain itself. And within the domain, I saw things like inaccessible health facilities, health services. And these codes also began to emerge also in the field. So as I was coding, I began to see that this was associated with that. Inaccessible healthcare services was associated with need for booking and inquiry services. Traditional health information, traditional and information isolated communities, I associated it with need for health education. And then I developed a theme, which was information and communication needs for end users. This was a theme. Now, these were codes. This was a code. This is another code. This is a code. And this particular theme, general theme, I associated with these codes. Then I associated this with this other overarching theme. So all of these I picked from the interviews, which I then put into other themes. And then this was another theme. And then you see, these were relationships that I was creating. And these become variables later on that somebody can say, let me go and find out if this truly exists within a rural healthcare system. Before I go any further, do we have any question as far as themes and codes are concerned?
No.
No. Okay.
Hello,
Now,
Doctor.
yes, please.
Good evening, team.
Good
I'm
evening.
failing to understand the difference between themes and codes.
Okay.
I think I request if you can throw more light on themes and codes,
Okay.
where the difference is.
Okay. Now, unfortunately, I don't think I have any of my old data. Now, let us say, let us assume we're going to just do an assumption using Susan's research. And maybe Susan online, maybe she can give us more details on that. Let us assume we are in Susan's research and she has collected quite a bit of information and she's trying to find out, and she has, in her research, in her data collection, she has interviewed a number of scouts, she has interviewed maybe a number of tourists who have had emergency situations, and she transcribes her data. That means she types it out, or the interviews and all everything that she has interviewed, everyone she has interviewed, what people say about maybe the challenges they have when emergencies come up while they are out in doing hiking, maybe from the scout's point of view, from the tourist point of view, and any other participant who may be in that research. She transcribes it. Then as she's moving on, then maybe she'll read through maybe one tourist will say, oh, I had this, when I was out, I had this incident, it happened, maybe I fell, the scouts were with me, then as they're with me, the scout, maybe I broke my leg, we informed the scout decided to go and get help, and he's going for help. He ran a certain number of kilometers to go to the point where he could actually call for help. Then another scout gives tells of another narration, said, yeah, we normally have challenges when people get problems. We have to run long distances to go and get help. Maybe Susan will ask, did anyone have a phone? That yes, maybe the person who was injured had a phone, the scout had a phone, everyone had a phone, but maybe they had run out of battery, or there was no network or something like that. Yeah? And then just from those things, Susan may start by saying, okay, maybe here there is in times of emergencies, you have a communication. The only communication means maybe she would put a lack of infrastructure in places of hiking. That could be that by that code, what she has noticed is maybe there's lack of infrastructure. In terms of infrastructure, it could be in terms of maybe to charge the phone, and in terms of network access. Those are two things. She can first start by putting power to charge phones, and then maybe the other one could be lack of network access. That when she begins by doing that, that becomes a code in itself. That in those smaller points which she has picked from the transcripts, those are codes. Now, a theme out of those two could be lack of infrastructure to support ICT communication or to support mobile communication. Lack of infrastructure, because the two of them, it's infrastructure. One is power, the other one is mobile network. The theme is the one that covers these two. Okay? Have you understood up to that point?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So now, in doing the analysis, you may come up with what they call a major theme and then a minor theme as you're going through your work. There are some things as a researcher where you decide this one is a major theme and it truly affects the phenomena I'm researching on. And this one is minor. You pick out those which are minor, those which are major. Later on, if your research becomes too huge, you may decide to let go of the minor ones, especially those which may not be, you may not be able to prove immediately. So you may be able to pick out only your major themes that you report on, that you know you are sure about. So here is a sample how somebody may decide to code. So somebody may decide to say, maybe from my interviews, I'm going to start with the person has picked out reading challenges, a need for authentic learning, need to read newspapers. Then from observation, somebody says, unwilling to work in a group, laziness, tardiness. And then from the questionnaire, somebody picks out these others. Now, from these, yeah, Tom, the researcher can begin to say, where can I put a relationship between these codes? Can I put a relationship? Is there a relationship between tardiness and reading challenges? Is there a relationship between laziness and need to read newspapers? Is there a relationship between unwilling to work with groups and lack of group cohesion? Those relationships can be created. And then afterwards, the researcher then creates themes out of them. You see, all this researcher has used 3 points, 3 different research methods and tools, but they have collected information which data they can then use to create an overall theme. Tom, am I making sense?
It's okay now. It's clear.
Okay. Now the theme is what you then begin to narrate in your data analysis chapter. Okay? It is what you begin to narrate. The theme itself, not the codes, the theme. The codes, this is the codes, from the codes you pick out the particular quotations from maybe 1 or 2 interviews, which emphasize the theme, what you're trying to bring out. Yeah, so this is where we say the actual quotes from the participants. As you're narrating the theme, you pull out the quotes from one or two participants emphasizing the feeling or the perception that participants brought out. Yeah, so each of the major themes that have emerged from your research, that is what you then begin to report in your analysis chapter. I can show you just a sample of some of the narrations I gave in my research. Now, use the research questions that you have basically to explain, to answer your narratives, to give explanation. Remember when we talked about qualitative research, we really said qualitative research, you must have research questions. And the narrations you're giving, you're answering your research questions. And we come back to this sample image that I have. I can just show you an example. Just give me a minute. I'm first going to stop sharing briefly. I pull out just one chapter. Just give me a minute. I pull out something. Now here I'm going to pull out a theme. Sorry, I'm just going to start sharing. So here was a theme that emerged from the research, from the findings, mobile phone literacy. This was something that we observed as we were carrying out the research, that there was limited mobile phone literacy. And I started, this was a theme that I first observed. And here I start by giving a quote. I give a quote of something somebody said, one of the participants stated. Then here, okay, yes, I basically used a questionnaire to give that point. But however, this was a theme. As the theme developed, when I talked about mobile phone literacy, yeah, there were things that were coming out. Age of VHTs influence someone's capacity. Limited mobile phone literacy. These were the codes that I kept seeing in interviews as time went on. The different codes that came out that I then related to the theme. First of all, there was mobile phone ownership and maintenance. Then there was mobile phone literacy. Yeah. So you see, as I had in the qualitative data, the mobile phone literacy came out when somebody said, for me, the only thing I know is how to make a call and to end the call. That is all I know. Make the call, receive the call. So this theme, I had seen it, I raised it, I quoted it. Then later on, I gave out an objective quiz kind of question, and it brought out experience in using SMS. I was asking people what was their experience in using SMS, and I related it to the age as well. Those who can send a message, you see those between 30 to 40. those between 40 to 50, and those between 50, those who are above 50, those who are able to send a message, things like that. So I then related it to what I had seen. Now, you see, I brought all the points, the questionnaire, the test paper, and the interviews and observations that I made. And I put all these to point out that this theme emerged. Mobile phone literacy emerged as a theme. So far, are we making sense?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Okay, so that is basically qualitative research, yeah? Qualitative data analysis this is a qualitative data analysis. It is a laborious process because you spend quite a bit of time looking at all these chunks of data, trying to come up with the codes and the themes. Like I said, you can't start initially and then you rubbish your work and you say, let me go back and redo it. It is important you stick with it, yeah? It's very, very important you stick with it. Once you're sure of your themes, your codes and your themes, you can defend your work you can defend what you've discovered adequately. Don't be tempted to rush, because many times we want to rush, we want to do things as quickly as possible. My advice is, yes, we want to finish on time. My advice normally is to students, start right away. Start immediately on your research. Once you get to know your research problem, then you can begin to write your proposal, which can then be approved, and you can begin collecting your data. Start collecting your data even before they say we approve. Start, yeah? Whatever data you collect, it's important. Just like as I was telling Susan, she hasn't even submitted a proposal, but let her start now. Whatever data she collects in qualitative data analysis is important. Okay? Okay, so far, I haven't had any question. So let me move to quantitative data analysis. So just to give you heads up again, I'm not an expert in quantitative data, and Kripen, please come in and guide us where I may prove to be a little bit ignorant.
Yes, Doctor, you will.
Okay, so now it is basically quantitative data is when we are looking at converting numerical forms into statistical and subject them to statistical analysis. So there's quite a bit of techniques here involved. And like anyone who has done it, there's quite a bit of techniques involved. Things like cleaning up the data, trying to make meaning out of it, trying to relate one variable to another. Maybe for those who've answered this way, how do they fare in this other question? For females, how do they feel about this? For males, how do they feel about this? Those who don't receive. I remember when I did a small research during the COVID-19, the 2020, lockdown, during the 2020 lockdown. And I was given some data to analyze. It was quantitative data. And as we first did the first analysis, the first basic one where we're looking at one variable at a time, then I thought, but what if we see those public health facilities, how do they do this, and private health facilities? What we expect private health facilities to do, is this what they're doing? And I remember one time we were collecting information, and we were asking both public and private health facilities. And it was supposed to be standard that public health facilities are supposed to get drugs from the National Drug Store, and then the private health facilities from joint medical stores. And we found out, and then we said, let's find out, is it really the case? And we found out that there were some private health facilities that were actually getting from the national medical drugstore, the national medical stores, which they were not supposed to do. But that was the case, that came out. So it involves some techniques. It also takes some thinking about it. There are quite a number of big words involved. I remember, let me see if I can get this. I remember at a certain point, Amber Crippen said something about getting a 0.1 or something. And Susan was asking, what is that? Quantitative analysis is quite complex. It has those certain big things and big words people speak. I remember the very first time I went to the Netherlands to visit my supervisor, and I was very scared, really worried about my inexperience. And then I had these two, I don't know if they were professors, whatever they were in the corridor talking, and they were using these really big words, and I was just shaking my head saying, God, what did you bring me to here? I don't even know what they are saying. But basically in quantitative analysis, you find those big words, those really big words, you find them there. But however, every big word has a definition, so let us not be scared. So basically, quantitative analysis is numerical representation and manipulation of observations. We shall see quite a bit. We shall see that in the next slides that will come. Now, the process of analyzing quantitative data, first of all, starts with editing. So editing essentially means we'll get rid of inconsistencies, things that will make us lose meaning. But however, also be careful about that. Like I was giving you the example of the analysis we did in 2020, where there was a questionnaire sent out to health facilities in Uganda, both public and private, which were supposed to be health facilities that provide palliative care to people who suffer from extreme pain. So we asked questions, and essentially these health facilities were health facilities that were supposed to receive morphine. Essentially, morphine is what is one of the primary medications given to people who are going through extreme pain. So the first question was, do you receive morphine? And these were health facilities that were supposed to, and then most of them said no. Not most of them, some of them said no. So in the analysis, we had to remove those facilities that don't receive. But we, however, argued saying that please, when we're talking with the stakeholders, we said, let us remove them, but let's discuss them on the side, because these are health facilities that were supposed to receive. But essentially, why did we remove them? Because if we removed those particular respondents, because later on they were going to answer questions like, who supplies you morphine? At what period? What are the intervals? How do you stock take? So all those other questions became null and void. Although for some of them eventually then gave answers to those particular questions, but in actual sense, those questions were null and void. If you're not receiving morphine, that means you don't have a supplier, it means you don't do stock taking, it means you don't have a storage system, and so on and so forth. So you remove that data, which is going to give you an incomplete picture, so to speak. Yeah, that's why we carry out editing. That data that is going to be incomplete. Then eliminate missing information. There are some respondents who may not fill out certain information. Remove it if it's going to cause inconsistencies. Then code. Begin to code your data. That this one involves the process of converting data into numerical form. So now take an example. The male, you may give them 1, and female, you may give them 2. Someone who said if you had questions of false and true or false, you may also decide to quantify that and give it a numerical value. If you gave a scale to say agree, disagree, and so on and so forth, you may also decide to give those numbers. Maybe strongly agree may be 5, and strongly disagree may be 0, and you give that scale. Yeah, this is essentially what we mean by giving a type of scale, categorizing some of your responses into a scale. This is when you begin to prepare your data. Why? Because all your data, remember, you're going to turn this into statistical interpretation. So unless it's a number, you won't be able to translate it into a statistical representation. Now, as we discussed slightly on Sunday, with quantitative research, you're dealing with variables, or rather relationships between variables. Now, as you begin to analyze your data, you'll analyze it you'll analyze one particular variable, which is referred to as univariate. Remember the big words we talked about? Yeah, we're starting with them now. So you may want to look at the way certain people of a certain age group behave. Remember when I showed you my research, when we looked at responses of those who are 50 and above, have they ever sent SMSs? And you could see their experience with SMS was significantly less than those who were 40, who were 30 and below, or between 30 and 50, 30 and 40, sorry. You could see there was a big difference. So you can look at particular age groups and say that these age groups, how do they behave with this particular gender, and things like that. If you're comparing, if you're looking at two variables, this is bivariate. If you're looking at a gender plus CGPA, or a gender, how do they perform, and things like that. If you have several variants, that is multivariant. If you're looking at sorry, my mouse is a bit erratic. So if you're looking at maybe gender and education and prejudice, that is, you're looking at a multivariant analysis. So here, just to look at a univariant analysis, if you remember even my graphs, the ones that I developed, they simply show a trend. The analysis it's looking at maybe one particular thing. If you're looking at age, for example, you're looking at whether something is increasing or decreasing. Look at situations when the president shows rates of infection. In this month, it was low, then it went on increasing, then we'll see when it's going down. Once the COVID-19 task force begins to see rate of infection going down, rate of deaths going down, then they know probably the infection rate, and maybe right now we are not in a critical stage. Maybe they can begin to advise the president, or now you can begin opening up. So there they are looking at maybe one variable. They're looking at a single variable. So normally when we're looking at a univariant, we're not involving relationships between two or more variables. Yeah. We're not, okay, this is a bit different from my research where I was looking at age and SMS use. That was a bivariant situation. So now, this type of analysis is when somebody is looking more to describe. Yeah, you're looking more to give a description, rather than explanatory. If you are using two variables or more, then you're looking at explaining something. Yeah, to explain a certain phenomena. Now, some of these, somebody may look at, for example, frequency distribution. Someone is looking at the number of responses to a question or to an occurrence of a phenomena. You may be looking at also personal data or classifications of variables. So these are the different scenarios when a univariate analysis is done. Here is an example where people are looking at what is your religious preference, and we are seeing how many Protestants are there, how many are Catholics, how many are Jews, how many are none, things like that. We see some of these things maybe in reports at schools and things like that. You may also want to have something like this if you want to start by describing the kind of audience or the kind of participants you had. Sometimes people will have initial questions on the questionnaire where they ask for your gender, your age, maybe your occupation, and then they'll say majority of the participants were this, and they show this was their occupation. Majority were in this age group. That's really descriptive in nature, where you're bringing out one person's just one variable. You're describing one variable about your participants. Here is another example where it's demonstrated that this particular table is shown in a form of a pie chart. So you can already see in what way you can begin to describe this kind of when you're looking at one particular variable. You may also want to use that kind of one variable to give averages. Maybe the majority of the respondents were of this particular age group. Majority of the respondents are of this particular religion, or majority of the respondents, things like that. When we're giving a particular giving a central tendency that is showing maybe this is the average, this is the mode, this is the medium. Here is another example when we are looking at just one particular gender. We can also do this when we're looking at dispersion, distribution of values. I remember when we talked about, at a certain point when we were talking about research design, and we talked about, what was that term? I forget it. Was it variance? I don't know if was it variance when we said, let's say we are looking at, we're trying to find out intelligence levels maybe of maybe women PhD holders, and we do an IQ test, and we try to find out variance, who is the lowest, who is the highest, how close are we? If we try to find the average, is there a huge disparity? Maybe some people, and quite a number, maybe 2 are 100, and then the remaining 6 whom they researched on are below 80. And then if you find the average may be kind of come in the middle, but however, because there's quite a huge gap, then you can say, oh, majority of women PhD holders have high IQ levels. No, you can't do that, even if you do the average count of them, because we are not close. If the actual tests per person is not close, there's a huge disparity, or what they call this, I think Crippen can give us a better understanding of what we call variance, range, and standard deviation. How far apart are we from the highest to the lowest, for us to say, oh, the average number, the average female PhD holder is quite intelligent. You may find that the standard deviation, or the difference between the highest and the lowest is quite huge. So you can't say, oh, the average female PhD holder is quite intelligent. You may find only a few are actually quite intelligent. Any questions so far with those big words? No? Or you might have all gone to sleep.
No question for me.
Okay. Now with the variables, there are also other terms now, like this. There are terms like continuous variable and a discrete variable. A continuous variable is one whose value may change. For example, income changes, the variable of age changes. Those are variables that, or variables like ratio, interval, that variable will have a continuously changing value. But some values don't change. For example, marital status, gender, nationality. And normally, or scale, where we have the nominal and ordinal scale, those values don't change. So this is where you may find, even on a questionnaire, somebody will ask, marital status, are you single, married, divorced? You know, gender, you're either male or female. Nationality, you're either Ugandan or whatever it is, but the value doesn't change. But age can change, income levels also change.
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please.
Hello?
Yes, please, I can hear you.
I think marital status can change. Someone can get a divorce.
Yes. Yes, that is true.
I'm saying, I think marital status in this case can change. Someone can be married and
the maybe Kripen can also give us more insight. I think that the point of it is that at the time the research is being done, that status is as is. But as time goes on, if it's a longitudinal study, yes, that can change for sure. And also in some countries, actually, even gender changes. Yeah, isn't that true? In some countries, gender changes, and also certain things I hear nowadays, my nieces and nephews tell me about gender fluidity and so on and so forth, being gender fluid. Yeah, so even that.
I think even in Uganda.
Even in Uganda, we have that now.
The gender, because when we try to develop some systems, they tell you not to leave it specific to the usual one we have, but to make it open. So I'm not so sure.
Yeah, we may be changing. That is, yeah, that may be the case.
Doctor.
Yes, please.
But according to, I think in relation to data, there's marital status remains discrete. You are male, you are female. It remains discrete, even if that's according to how I'm seeing it in relation to data.
Yes. Yeah, normally we leave it as discrete because we don't expect change there, at least for the time the research is being done. Now, the second one we looked at was bivariant and multivariant. This is when we're looking at two or more. And here we're trying to explain, we're trying to bring meaning into something. And essentially, this is when we were trying to understand if being in a certain category affects another category. For example, if you're married, does that affect your income levels, or things like that? But we're trying to turn meaning. Unlike the first one where we're trying to give a description, when we're using two or more variables, we're trying to provide an explanation or a causality. So now here is an example of a research that was done in the US, asking people's opinion about whether marijuana, or what is referred to as weed, should be legalized or not. And this researcher actually puts the response according to age. Yeah. For example, here, 24% of those who are above 55 were saying it should be legalized, while 76% were saying no, it should not be legalized. So here it shows you that the response of whether something should be legalized or not depends on age. And lo and behold, while you'd expect that the under 21s would want it to be legalized, actually said no. It's actually the 21s those between 21 and 35 and 36 and 54 that were in the majority of saying legalize. But there's actually not much difference between the over 55 and the 27, the under 21s, their response. There isn't a significant difference between them. So you may find actually that the much younger generation may have the same values, more or less the same values as the older generation. And here you can make comparisons. Just from looking at this, just by looking at it, I've been making comparisons and reaching some level of conclusion here. We normally combine variables to get a better picture of an analysis, or to provide more meaning to our research. Interestingly, the research that I was telling you about, the survey that we did, we gave it to a group of students in the US. For them, their particular course unit, they were looking at basically creating better visuals with quantitative data. And they actually got the research we did and they mapped it. For instance, we had asked the question about how long does it take a health facility to receive morphine. And they actually mapped the health facilities based on where they were located, the districts they were located. And they found those which were closer to the health facilities within the Kampala region, had a shorter period for receiving morphine, while those that were far off took a much longer time to receive their morphine. And we hadn't even thought about it, but these students gave a better picture just by visualizing, by getting that particular data we had, and they put it in a map, in the Ugandan map. And these were students in the US trying to give a much better meaning. So here is that kind of example. Handling the don't knows, whether we should include people who don't know, who say they don't know about something. Remember, that is a key question that should be asked. I gave you the case example of the survey that we did with palliative care, where we had people who said they don't receive morphine. And the fact that they said they don't receive affected all the other questions. So we said, let's pull it out. However, we said, let us pull those numbers and report them, because it is important for policy planning and for the stakeholders to understand that we as a country have a target to meet as far as distributing morphine. So if you have a health facility that is designated and is supposed to receive and is on record, is supposed to receive but is not, we should report this differently. If those outliers, those don't knows, are going to affect your response, or they are going to give a misinterpretation, pull them out. However, if the don't knows, if those that don't know, or those that are not fitting in your category, if it's going to affect, if it sometimes is important, like the answer, what I gave you are those particular participants who are not receiving, report it. You can give it a separate report, because it provides a significant point or explanation that needs to be taken note of. Now, just some general principles as far as bivariant analysis is concerned. Here you're trying to contrast two variables, okay? you are trying, and the most important thing also you have to understand is that you're trying to analyze these two variables simultaneously. So even in your questionnaire, you must have asked them, these variables should have been asked at the same time with the same group of people, because you're trying to compare the two. Now, unlike this I had already said before, when you have a univariant analysis, it's largely for description. When you have bivariant, you're trying to determine relationships between two variables. This I had already stated earlier. So here we have the example of religion and attendance, where we are trying to determine the attendance of women and men. And here it shows women attend more than men. And therefore, we can maybe make a conclusion, maybe that maybe women attend are more religious than men, or some people might say women have more time for church than men, whichever conclusion you may want to come up with. So here is just an example where someone said women are still treated as second-class citizens, people deny status gratification, hence women, because people deny women that second level, that a higher status in society, they therefore tend to be more religious than men. So this is just someone's conclusion from their research, a hypothesis somebody came up with. Percentages, and maybe here Krippen can help us explain better about the reading percentages from a table. Here, when you look at this is a scattering of the original data may be presented in this way, where you have one male, one female, another a female here with this response, another male with this other response. However, when you separate the groups and you give percentages in terms of gender, you may say this number of women gave a positive response to my question, and this number of women gave a negative response. You could relate that to the attendance to church. Maybe you could say a total of maybe 12 or 20 women said yes, they attend church, and only 2 said no. Now, when you put that in percentages, you can say now 8% or 80% of the respondents, female respondents, attend church and only 2 do not. And only 60% of male respondents attend church and only 4 said no, they don't attend. So these percentages give a clearer picture, yeah? The image it gives, the picture it gives, especially if you are going to focus on an analysis and a better visual, the percentages help to really give a better relationship between the independent and dependent variable. So here is another example. And really, when we talk about picture speaking 1,000 words, really what that means, we're talking about infographics. Infographics really give a much better, or they speak louder than just using the narrative, which is quite common with qualitative research. So the picture really giving those informatics gives power to your research as you're presenting your data. Now, rules in reading tables. When we are presenting percentages, it is important to understand how they are read so that your readers can know exactly what it is you're trying to say. So if the table percentage, if the percentage is down, then you read across, yeah? If the percentage table is down, I'm assuming if that is down at the bottom, then you read across. Then if the percentage table is across, read down. That is would that be on? There is the vertical and the horizontal. So down is at the bottom, and then across is this where I'm pointing at, the opposite side. So those are the rules that exist for presenting percentages. But also this can come into your narration to explain further in your narration. Then we have the multivariate analysis. Then this is when we are looking at more than 2 variables in our analysis. Okay, here is an example where we are looking at age, gender, and religious attendance. Okay, 3 variables at the same time. This can be quite complex to present in a table, but softwares, I noticed, I have some small experience with SPSS. SPSS can help you provide those, create such tables, which will show you more than 1 variable, which will show you analysis of more than 1 variable. So here is an example, again, which shows people who are under 40 and those who are 40 and above, yep, and their tendency levels. Now, just in conclusion, about quantitative data. What quantitative data does is to classify futures. We classify futures and we count them. We can even construct really complex statistical models. Those ones I will not attempt. Maybe Kripen can give us an idea, but those I will not attempt on that. We can make generalizations about larger populations using statistical or quantitative analysis. Yes, as long as we have a valid sampling. As long as we have valid sampling, it's possible to generalize our findings to the larger population. So quantitative data allows us to discover about phenomena, certain predictive behaviors about phenomena. So in a nutshell, that is quantitative analysis. Like I said before, I'm not an expert, but I have done, just from my little experience in quantitative analysis. Any question so far?
Thank you, Doctor. My question is, when you are, for example, in your research topic, there is someone who asked me a question that show your dependent and independent variable in my research topic. Okay. So how do you include that in a topic, like in your, that is my question.
Now that one is, now, the research topic, essentially, how do I answer this one? In the research topic, if I can just give from experience, the research topic immediately tells the reader what it is you're trying to do. Yeah, the research topic itself. Now, once the research, first, before we even come to the research topic, let's first come to the research problem. If in the research problem, you identify your variables, or in the research question, research question or hypothesis, you've immediately identified your variables, then those variables should appear in concept, the concept of those variables should appear in your topic.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm making sense. Those particular words, the variables should appear. Let me.
So meaning Meaning
let
that
us,
from the...
let us say you're doing research and quantitative research, and you want to look at the uptake of e-learning systems in institutions of higher learning. And
yes.
you have maybe observed that while there have been implementations of e-learning systems, there has been a limited or no uptake or adoption of these. And you want to argue that essentially this particular, if it's a particular one, a particular e-learning system, you want to argue that essentially it is because this system is not useful, it's not perceived, it is not user friendly. Let us talk about, let's not talk about functionality, but you want to argue in that sense. And in your topic, essentially, it should appear, you should be immediately arguing, or you should be talking about the usability of Dash system and its adoption rate and its adoption institution of higher learning. The topic itself, you have not stated the hypothesis, but you are hinting to its usability and its adoption in the topic itself. I don't know if I answer your question. Maybe Krippen can also give us more insight.
Yes, please, Doctor. Mr. Tom,
Yep.
when you look at a topic, in most cases, a topic is divided. A topic has 3 sections. It has the independent section,
Yes.
the dependent section,
Yes.
and the case study. In between,
Yes.
they are linking words. Those words that help you to link. Let me just give you like example. For example, public-private partnership and customer satisfaction in tourism sector. Now, the moment you write your topic, for example, like that, when somebody is reading it, the moment you look at a topic, immediately you pick out the independent. I can say maybe one on the left and another one on the right.
Yes.
Then in the middle, let's introduce in like a case study. Why is it called an independent? Why is another one called independent?
Independent.
Yes. Now, the one that we call independent, the one I've said, for example, is on the left. When you look at a paper, the A4 paper. Now, the independent is it means it has more variables that you are going to look at.
That is independent.
Independent.
Okay.
Now, the dependent, it means it cannot stand on its own. It will depend on these other variables.
Oh, so the dependent is the one which is depending from other, it is depending from other variables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how it is. So the moment you are formulating the topic, those are the things that will come into your mind.
Yes.
The independent and the dependent, then a case study. Then from there, you use the linking words like and. Do you remember Doctor was talking about the impact of this? So those are the linking words, but they will link the dependent and the independent.
So in this scenario, we are having a cause and effect.
Exactly.
Yes, I think that's what Krippen is trying to say. That I think you're basically your topic is already implying a cause and effect between your independent and dependent variables.
Okay, it's clear.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe, Doctor, let me also supplement on one or two things. I remember from our last chat, we had stopped on a questionnaire.
Yes.
Now, once your questionnaire is approved, and they tell you, okay, you go in the field and start collecting data. Let me take an example of UPDF. Now, the moment you are going in the field, you're not going to collect data from all the soldiers. You say, I'm going to collect data from Mbuya barracks.
Yes.
Now, when you reach in Mbuya, you don't start from the gate issuing questionnaires. There is what we call category. You categorize your respondent. You say, for example, I'm going to correct my research. UPDF may be a far-fetched example. Let me say a school. If you're going to correct you are going to collect the data from a school.
I'm
you
sorry,
know, in a school. Yes, please.
I'm sorry. Use the UPDF one. It's the best example. The school is easy. Please use the
UPDF. Okay, Susan. For example, if you know you're going to collect your data from UPDF, you know you have generals. These are people who make rules. Who the top command. You know you have supporting staff. People are not UPDF, but they are in. Then you know you have soldiers, other soldiers who are not UPDF. Then you have supporting staff. Now you have already you have categorized your people. Now each category you make, it has a particular number which we call population. If they are generals, you know you are going to have 10 generals, and you should you say there are 10 generals. What's the number of supporting staff? Maybe they are 50 supporting staff. What is the number of these other regular forces? You say maybe they are 150. Now, you have a total of 200. Now, the moment you say you have a total of 200, you should pick this information from somewhere. For example, you can pick it from UBOS. When you visit Mbuya, when you're seeking permission, they can give you like attendance, like a rota. And in your research, you indicate it down, which we call the source. Source obtained from Mbuya UPDF. Now, once you have the population, you are not going to administer 200 questionnaires. There's what we call a sample. You should pick a sample. Now, from a population to a sample, there are two methods of reaching there. One method, we use a formula. Another method, we use what we call Morgan and Craigyan tables. These tables are ready-made, they are there. Even if you go on the internet, if you go anywhere, you'll see Morgan and Craigyan table. They are standard statistical tables. All you need to do is to look at population and you look at the sample space. For example, if we have a population of 50, you're not going to administer questionnaires to 50 people. They say, out of 50, administer only 45. If you are looking at 200 people, a category which has a population of 200 people, you only administered 127. If your population is 15, then administered 14 people. If your population is 1 million, then you administer to around 450 something. These are standard tables accepted academically and scientifically. Now, it means if you are going to look at 200, if your population, total population is, for example, 250 or 200, you'll find that the people, the administered questionnaires would be like 170. Now, once you have the sample size, it means I'm just going to get there to look at 171 people. or respondents, but my total population is 250. So I don't need all of them. I only need 171 respondents. You move, you print your questionnaires, which will, your questionnaires from the approved one. Yes, please.
You have just hinted about if you have like 250 questionnaire, 250 respondents, you just administer like 171 questionnaires. Why not 200?
When do you?
Why not 200? Why do you go for 171? Is there any formula you use to arrive to that, or?
That's exactly what I was explaining. When you have the population, for example, you have seen the people saying we have done research in the whole of Uganda, and you find you have never been asked any question. The reason is very simple. They don't need you to look at the whole population. They look at those agreed the statistical formula. I'm just trying to look in one of these things so that I can pick it from there. What happens then if we have a population, which means these are the whole the group of people you are going to look at. You are not going to do research on Uganda. Uganda is too big. It has 40-something million people. You're not going to ask every person, but they want you to get a good representation of Ugandans. That's why I was saying, for you to move from a population, which is the entire group, even if it's, for example, your organization, you have 100 people. You're not going to ask every person because some people will not be there, but you should get a good representation. How do you get this good representation? There are two methods. One is a formula. It's a formula is there. Another way, you can use statistical tables. These tables are also there. All you need to do is to look at population. For example, if there are 90 people, what is the accepted good representation number you should look at? If there are 90, the table says you only look at 73. If there are 500 respondents, the total population is 500, you should look at only 217. That's what the table says. Are we together? Are we together, Dan?
Thank you, Crippen.
Yes.
That's okay, but my concern or my question is there like a formula that if I have a population of 500, once I put in this information, then it will give me an answer, maybe for me to go and administer to 250 respondents.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Because my concern is, why if we have 500, why are we administering like 250 and not 100 or 400?
And this is what I'm explaining. If we have entire population in the organization as 500 employees, when you are carrying out research, you're not going to carry out research on the whole 500, but they are agreed representation, scientifically proven representation, that you don't need to look at all 500. How do I reach at agreed number? There are two ways. One way is a formula. You put in your 500, then the formula will give you the right number. The second method is a table. The table is there drawn. It's called Morgan and Cragen tables. These are agreed tables. When they are 500, they are saying, look at only 117 only. I don't know if you are getting me, Dan.
Yeah, it's now clear.
Now, it means you are going to go in that particular area or your research area, which we call a case study now this time. We've printed 217 questionnaires. You administer your questionnaires. You give your questionnaires to people. Then people will tick, others will not tick and keep them in their desks. Others will say, I'm not interested in your work. Now, if you administer 217, how many are going to return back? Those ones we call them the response rate. Then I want you to get me clear where we started from. You have a category of the soldiers. You are going to look at generals and other generals, regular military. You also have another supporting staff. That's the category. From a category, you go to the population. In Mbuya, there are 500. Yes. How are they distributed? Generals, they are 10. Non-military, they are 150, like that. From a population, you go to a sample size. How do I get a sample size? A formula or a table? I go with my envelope, my questionnaires are there, and I administer these questionnaires. At the end of the day, or after 3 hours, I return back my questionnaires. How many are going to return? That's what we call a response rate. Now, you sit down, you get back your questionnaires, put them in an envelope, you go back and sit. Let's take an example that you are going to use SPSS. Like what the doctor said, the commonly used statistical package. You sit down. There's what we call coding. What is coding? SPSS or statistical formulas, they will not allow you to write big sentences. Your question 1, let's call it P1. You're going to give it a number, P1. Another question, the second one, P2, P3, P4. For example, if you have 3 objectives, I can decide that my objective 1, I'm going to call it P1, P2, P3, P4, or up to P10. If I have 10 questionnaires in my objective 1. Then I go to objective 2. Objective 2, I can say my objective 2 will be B1, B2, B3, up to B10. My objective 3, I can call it C1, C2, C3. What you are actually doing, you are assigning short forms, those small codes, C1, C2, C3. You are trying to code your questionnaire. When you sit on SPSS, it will not allow you to write the whole sentence. It will only give you a provision for putting P1, P2, 3, P4. But you know that P represents my first questionnaire. Then it also gives you an option where you can put in the whole sentence. I don't know if, Dan, you are getting me at this stage.
Yes.
Now, after doing that, you start entering your response. You start entering in what you picked from the field. For example, if you had asked a question about gender, now SPSS gives you opportunity that you are not going to write male, female like that. For easing your work, you give them codes. Males, you give them 1. Females, 2. If you had asked about maybe age category, you can say from 18 to 30, I'm going to give them 1. For example, 31 up to 65, I will give them 2. Then you keep on entering the other questionnaires you picked from the field, it's always a good practice that once you have entered a questionnaire, you tick on it, put it aside. Now you have entered all questionnaires. After entering your questionnaires, you don't start by analyzing. You carry out some checks. Remember, during entering, you could have written 5, 5 instead of writing 5. Remember, our questionnaire, we had given it a scale, which we called a Richter scale. And we said 5 is going to go for strongly agree. A 4 will go for agree. But during typing, instead of writing a 4, you make a mistake and write 44. It happens. You make these mistakes. You'll find in a questionnaire where somebody has not filled, he has left some spaces. You'll find in a questionnaire where somebody has just ticked only one question on the entire questionnaire. So those questionnaires are put aside. After entering in, you check errors. One of the errors we normally check, they are outliers. Instead of typing a 5, you have written 5, 5. So you go back and correct that outlier. You'll find by mistake, you could have repeated a questionnaire. In SPSS, once you repeat a questionnaire and you carry out those checks, it will show you that this questionnaire has been repeated. It is not common to find that 2 people have filled the same questionnaire. They have ticked the same boxes from start to the end. Even if they have done that, it means you have the same response. The answers are the same, so you don't need it. So you remove the repeating questionnaires. Then you start the analysis. What happens in the analysis? It depends on what you want. Now,
Hassan has a question.
Yeah, you talk about getting the population and the sample size. Now, say like the population is 1 million, according to Morgan, you know that the sample size would be like around 300 something. Now,
yes.
In case, in the event that you've given now these questionnaires and you've collected, the number you've collected, some people didn't give back your. Are you supposed to pay more to go and fill in to match up with that sample size, or you just continue your data analysis?
Now, what happens? They are agreed levels. For example, it's not always advisable that if we have respondents who are only 30 to go ahead and do analysis. It's not advisable. Respondents only 30 and you are carrying out a quantitative analysis. It's not always good. At the same time, if you administer your questionnaires and you return questionnaires which are below 50%, then you have to go back and administer another set of questionnaires. That's why I said we have a category, we have a population, we have a sample size, we have a response rate, then we have the percentage of return. How many questions, among the questionnaires you returned, do you reach 50%? This 50% is of sample size, not the entire population, because that's not what took in the field. Your target was not the entire population, but the sample size. You should make sure they are at least 50% and above. That's one. If the questionnaires are below 30, most people don't, most institutions, they don't allow you to analyze when the questionnaires are below 30. They assume that 30 is a smaller number, which you should, you can carry out in an interview guide, one-on-one, because 30 is not a big number. Now, during the analysis, there are different things that you can engage in. However, Doctor.
Yes, please.
If you can help me and go back to one of the graphs, there's a graph I saw.
This one? Which one?
No, it was I think a pie chart. It was like a pie chart.
This one.
Yeah, that. Yes. Now, drawing and getting a pie chart like this one is not the hardest thing. It is very simple. Like in SPSS, you got analysis and pick exactly what you need. You put in variables, because I cannot show them to you, but let's get the output. And you run a pie chart like this one. There are three things I need you to note. One, we have a presentation, we have analysis, we have interpretation. In social research, when somebody says a presentation, present, you can present using a pie chart, you can present using a table, you can present using a graph, you can present using anything as long as you are presenting. What are you presenting? What you picked from the field. For example, from an example we are seeing, this person presented using a pie chart. Once you do a presentation, on your topic, and you should also focus on your case study. For example, when you look at this pie chart we have, in the meaning, what comes into your mind? Why do we have 57% as Protestant? Why do we have 23% as Catholics? In other words, what is the meaning behind what you have presented? It's not a matter of drawing a graph and you throw it there, but come up with the meaning of what you have presented, which is the analysis. Now, why do we have more Protestants, for example, attending church than Catholics? Or why do we have only 2% of Jewish? You should give a reason, a researchable reason, a meaningful reason. That's the second step. First step was presenting. You have drawn a pie chart, you have put it there. Second step, analysis, which is the meaning. Then you go to the third step, the interpretation. Now, in the interpretation, when they talk about interpretation in social research, they are talking about implications. What are the implications of the meaning you gave in relation to your presentation? When you are writing an interpretation, which is an implication, there are things you should focus your mind on. Number one, long-term goals. You should focus on strategic objective of an organization, or you should focus strategic objective of a country. What are the current events? You should focus on new trends. New trends. You should focus on government policy. Let me give you an example. This is an this is more of religion, which may not bring it out. Doctor, there was also another graph of age, which I saw, a bar graph. I think it's behind.
Age and attendance?
Yes, in a graph, it would give us.
I think this one. Age, gender, and attendance. Was it this one?
Okay. For example, it could be this. There's also another graph. A graph would bring it better. Then with time, we can always go to a table.
Okay, let me see if I have a.
It could be somewhere behind.
No, I think the other one was the only. No.
Okay, let's just use an example of males and females.
Oh, it was
If you have,
about. Was it the one about? Yeah, legalizing.
for example, legalizing
Yes,
the
yeah.
one of. Let's take an example of males and females. You have drawn your table, your bar chart. You find that in the organization, there are more males than females. Step one, present a graph. You have presented it. Step two, what is the meaning? Which is the analysis? Why do we have more females? Or why do we have more males than females? It could be a number of reasons. It could be a recruitment process. It could be a recruitment process. It could be a policy. It could be the nature of the work. For example, you find some organizations, they need people are going to go in the field, and you find them favoring more males than females. It could be, for example, it could be find more of a numerical, the kind of work like auditor generals, you find more of males than females. So you should give a reason why there are more males than females. Another step is the interpretation, the implication. Even if, what is the implication of having more males than females in your organization? At this level, they expect that once you have done this course or a master's, then you should be able to advise management. And your advice comes from the implications. If we continue employing more males than females, what is going to happen? If your organization is more of affirmative, it is leaning to affirmative action. Now, in your policy, you can advise that in the next 5 years, we should recruit 70% of females than males. If your organization is more of labor intensive, from the policy point of view, you can say, let's go ahead and employ more males. Some of these decisions, they come from this data analysis. So we need to analyze data to the point of decision making. And the point of decision making is the implication. That's why I said implication. What is the long-term goal? What is the strategic objective of this organization? What are the new trends we are looking at? How can we adjust within our policies? Now, those three will guide us in our data analysis. You have a map now to follow. What is the next step? You should be able to tell somebody who is looking at you at your research, at your office.
Adapt what you want. Now, when you hide the criminal, again, you are not completing the crime. Huh?
Okay, sorry about
I don't know
that.
if I have.
There's Hassan has his hand up.
Okay, Mr. Hassan.
No, I'd raised that one long time. I've already asked the question.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Now, you should tell people, remember you administered your questionnaires, but what was the response? You need to present this response. Strong on a particular question, how many people said strongly agree or disagree or they were not sure? In most cases, if you present it in a table, then you give a percentage and a number. For example, they said should be legalized, which was 27%. If it was in a form of a table, there are people who prefer that you say 27%, then in the brackets, you put in 27% came from where? Then you put in another number. There is what we call response rate. How many people responded to your questionnaires? How did they respond? Who said what on a particular questionnaire? You do that using a response table. Depending on the direction of your work. Remember, if we use the Likert scale, the scale of 1 up to 5, you'll find you're going to look for the mean. What mean? Let's give them the meaning to the mean. You find that it has a range from 1 up to 5. Most people, when somebody says strongly agree, another one says agree, they have all agreed. If somebody says strongly disagree, another one says disagree, they have all disagreed. What is happening? You had a big questionnaire, now you are narrowing it down from a 5 Likert scale to a 3 Likert scale, meaning you have people who agreed and the people who disagreed. And if you want a category of people who are not sure, you can also include it. It's always a good practice that any data you collect from the field, you should be able to present it. You can present it in appendix or you can present it in your work as long as it makes meaning. Now, if the mean is above 3, it indicates that there was agreement in your work. If the mean is below 3, it will represent there was disagreement. Some of the things I cannot show them because I'm using a phone to do what? Just speak, but I'm trying to show you how you move from a questionnaire up to your work. Now, once you have given the response rate, then is what we call empirical findings. The findings that really took you in the field, which most cases is objective by objective. Remember our rule 1, present, analyze, interpret. You are going to present this table. Then you go ahead and give the meaning. Then you go ahead and give the interpretation. Now, from there, remember, now you are going deep into your work. There are different ways you can really look at your work. You can use cross tabulations. You can use correlations. You can use regressions, depending on exactly what you want to pick from your work. If it's a correlation is a relationship between one or different variables. Now, remember, Tom was asking about the independent and the dependent. This is a quantitative line. You want to see, is there a relationship between independent and dependent? That's what you are trying to find out. Now, to do that, find if there is a relationship, you use a correlation. These correlations are there in SPSS. Just a matter of clicking and you'll be able to get them. Now, there are different types of correlation. Let's look at only what we call a Pearson correlation. A correlation can be a negative, can be a positive. A correlation runs from 0 up to 1. A correlation can be statistically significant. If you go deep, there's what we call one-tailed and two-tailed, but those ones are not important right now. If a correlation is a positive, it means if I increase independent, dependent is going to increase. If it's a positive correlation, it means if I enhanced my independent variable, my dependent variable is also going to be enhanced. If I increased employer's salary, then I expect performance to also increase. If we get results that are in a positive direction, it means if when I increase the salary, performance also increased. But at the same time, if you can get a negative correlation, it means if you get a negative correlation, when you increase the salary, performance reduced. It can happen. And getting a negative correlation or getting negative results is not bad. What is important is the meaning and the implication you give it. Remember, this correlation is going to come in a form of a table. It will automatically, that table will come up with values. A value will have a negative or it will not have a negative. Now, remember we said a Pearson correlation runs from 0 up to 1. A correlation can be weak. A correlation can be strong. Some people say a correlation is moderate. Some people actually say it is relative. But let's stick to only a correlation that is strong or weak. It means if I get a correlation that is below 0.5, that's why I said, just imagine a scale from 0 up to 1. In the middle, we have 0.5. If I get a correlation that is between 0 up to 0.5, I will call that one a weak correlation. If it is between 0.5 up to 1, I will call it a strong correlation.
Kripen, I think
I've
Susan,
drawn my table.
sorry, Kripen, I think Susan has a burning question.
Okay, Susan.
Yes, you left me somewhere behind a little bit, and I needed some clarification.
Yes.
My project, the one that I was working on, I'm working on, the research procedure that I took was a questionnaire. The first thing we did was to categorize the different people that we are going to do the questionnaires on, which was basically top management, middle, the guides, and everyone below. Now, what happened was top management was giving the wrong answers, and then the people who are giving us the correct answers were people who could not fit in the questionnaires.
Okay.
So the only way we could get information out of them was on the field with face-to-face questions and answers. You go up on the mountain, you ask these people. So how do you communicate here? How do you do it? And then that is how we got the information. And we also had to experience it to be able to know, to basically tally the data we are collecting from top management, the data we are collecting from the people on ground, and what we are also seeing.
Now, Susan, what normally happens? Top management, these people have extra information. They know even things they attend meetings, they are more knowledgeable. They know the changes that are coming, which these other people don't know. In most cases, we use what we call, we target them as purposively. It's always a good practice if you target somebody purposively to administer an interview guide. Because for him, he's a top person. He knows what is coming, the changes that are coming. He knows details about the organization. He knows details about the operations of an organization. So for you to get the correct information from that person, you target him purposively with an interview guide, most cases. You can also target them with a focus group discussion. Those people are very hard to get. You can even administer.
Now, they were easy to get for me, yeah? However, this was the limitation. My questionnaire was basically focusing on communication up on the mountains and for the guides and safety.
Yes, I'm coming to that, Susan.
The answers they were giving was, we have enough communication, the guides have walkie-talkies, they can communicate properly. So we did a survey and even paid for a few other members so that we could go up one of the mountains. And the one thing we saw was there was zero communication on ground. It does not exist. So when someone was injured, a porter had to run down the mountain for 24 hours to get support and run back up.
Yes, what, Susan, in your scenario, that those things normally happen. Now, what is important is the art of representation, of reporting your information. That's why you see when people are presenting, they're using a triangulation, what doctor was talking about. Words like, however, despite of the fact that this happened, people on the ground were reporting something different. But even before you go to presenting your work, we are still on correcting it. A questionnaire can be self-administered, or a questionnaire can be, you can assist somebody to fill a questionnaire. Remember, most these questionnaires are written in English, most cases.
That is true.
You go in the field, you find somebody cannot read or speak English. You get an interpreter, who you ask a question, then somebody says, no, that one is okay. No, that one I don't know. This one is like this. Then you help somebody to fill a questionnaire.
Yeah, actually what Crippen is saying is true, Susan. Like for my case, I had designed my questionnaire in English, and when I was thinking of translating it in Luganda so that I could give it to the VHTs, they advised me, no, that you may lose certain meanings. So what I did, I got an interpreter. When I would meet these people as a group, they would give them, then the interpreter would start, okay, question one is saying this. If you mean this, tick this. If you mean like that. So basically it was a questionnaire, but somebody was interpreting it.
Yes, those are assisted questionnaires. There are people where you go and you find you have to give.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
In this process now, I'm seeing we are bringing in more participants. For example, the interpreter. So meaning that during the research, you have even to put in some finances, because you can't just pick someone to go and interpret for people. So it means you are going to, at the end, you pay for this person for that job done to interpret for you for these other.
Yes, that is for sure.
There's
always a cost implement. That's why they ask you to consider cost. They ask you to consider time, consider feasibility.
Research is expensive.
Yes, you have to consider quite a number of things.
And both in qualitative and quantitative, they have to be considered. You may find you are going to do a research and you have to record. Now, where these people are seated, there's a lot of wind. So, or you want to take a video. So you find you have, you're focused on asking the right questions. But if you don't ask the right questions, you will not get the right answers. So then somebody will be able to hold the gadget, Somebody will be able to keep on adjusting the microphone and keep on moving it. So you need research assistants. There are situations where you may not need a research assistant. You administer a questionnaire and it works out. Now,
so in a scenario where like the questionnaires or the one-on-ones that you're doing with the people to get the info, to collect the data, require a translator, do you, like in your research, do you say clearly that this was an assisted questionnaire?
Yes, you say it. I've seen people are not good at data analysis. They say I used a data analyst. I don't know what for the case of Uganda Matters, I don't know if they allow data analysis, but in most cases they allow somebody to analyze data for you and explain it, as long as you're able to explain it.
Yeah.
But it's always good practice that you know how to analyze your data and pick meaning out of it. Because when somebody analyzes it for you, or if you don't go in the field, during the process of giving the meaning and the interpretation, you become shallow. You find your explanations are a bit lacking. But if you go on the ground, you have interacted with these people. During that time, you are picking other information, you're observing. You find you have a lot to explain compared to somebody who get money, give it to somebody who does research and he does it for you, because he doesn't know the context, your context. Or he is interested in putting explanation and you're able to move.
And by the way, Susan, from what you are saying, when you said the top management has one view and those on the ground have another view, that is also another finding that you have. This clearly shows a disconnect between management and the implementation. So that is also another finding that you can present.
I see what you mean, because for us, what we saw out of that, like from my research, what I saw out of that was the presentation of, I will just say it, from UWA on what they expect up on those mountains is so different on the reality of what is happening.
So that is also it's also a key finding. It's a key finding actually that you can present. That's an emerging theme already that shows you a clear disconnect between management and implementation of what is supposed to be policy.
Okay, going back to where we had reached, and I remember where, I think correlation. So remember we had, from Tom's question, we have the independent, we have the dependent. And this correlation is helping us to give, we are trying to see if there is any relationship. It's like what they do for a DNA. They say, Susan, these are kids are yours, and they look for a relationship, and the relationship is 0. It's exactly what happens here. Is there a relationship between, for example, customer satisfaction and infrastructure development? Yes. If it is there, what is the relationship? Is it a weak relationship? Is it a strong relationship? If it's a weak or if a strong relationship, what does it mean? It means an organization. Now we have reached on the implication. For them to be able to achieve this goal, then they should focus on probably infrastructure development, something like that. Now, after giving the relationship, it's always good that you go to an extra step. You look at the influence. That's the regression. Now, researchers, most of quantitative researchers, they use a hypothesis. Now, you need to either accept or reject a hypothesis. Now, in order to do that, to accept or reject, you run what we call a regression analysis. Now, in regression analysis, once you run a regression, doing a regression analysis, You come up with 3 tables, a summary table, an ANOVA table, and what we call a B table. What are the steps of running a hypothesis? You have a null hypothesis. You have alternative hypothesis. You state the level of significance. For social research is 0.5, which means you allowed your error estimate is only 5%. Then you state the formula. This time the formula is going to be a regression. In a regression, we're going to run ANOVA. Now, this one, I don't know how I will just simply say it verbally, but probably once you run a regression, you'll be able to look at it. When you run a regression and you come up with a summary table, this summary table shows you by what percentage does the independent influence on the dependent. In other words, by what percentage does A influence on B? It will come out, the percentages will come out. You'll get your R, you get the R adjusted, R squared, R adjusted. They are all there in space. Once you click on it, they will come. Then you go back to your map, you present, analyze, interpret. Now you go to the ANOVA. I've already given you the steps of running.
Sorry, we seem to have lost. Can anyone here sing? Tom is trying to speak. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think Kripen is one who went off. Kripen seems to have gone off.
True.
His bundle is finished.
Sorry about that, but I think
the bundles were timed.
I think he has really given us, I think, a good, clear explanation on quantitative analysis, and I really appreciate that. I don't know if we have any questions. We can have another discussion another day. I was thinking that for tomorrow, I want to put up for you a small quiz and relax. I know quite a number of people have been really hit hard with this COVID this week. Today was supposed to be a public holiday, but I thought, let me just have it today and then give you off tomorrow. Is that okay with everyone?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Okay with me.
Oh yeah, we're okay with that.
Okay. Okay, then let me wish you a good evening. I'll let you know once I've put up the quiz.
Have a blessed night.
You too, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too, bye.